Okay, I'm going to read from Matthew 27:62 through 66. The next day, the one after preparation day, the chief priests and the Pharisees went to Pilate. "Sir," they said, "we remember that while he was still alive, that deceiver said, 'After 3 days I will rise again.' So give the order for the tomb to be made secure until the 3rd day. Otherwise his disciples may come and steal the body and tell the people that he has been raised from the dead. This last deception would be worse than the first." "Take a guard," Pilate answered. "Go, make the tomb as secure as you know how." So they went and made the tomb secure by putting a seal on the stone and posting the guard. Now I'm going to read Luke 23:55 and 56. The woman who had come with Jesus from Galilee followed Joseph and saw the tomb and how his body was laid in it. Then they went home and prepared spices and perfumes, but they rested on the Sabbath in obedience to the commandment.
Here we are on the Saturday of Holy Week, sitting between Good Friday and Resurrection Sunday. Never really heard a name for this Saturday. I guess you could call it Silent Saturday, as things seem pretty quiet, as we see not a whole lot happening in the Gospels. Maybe you call it Sabbath Saturday, as this was the Jewish Sabbath, and Jesus' followers were commanded to rest at that time. So we find these women, these followers of Jesus, and what are they doing? Well, they're at home, they're preparing spices and perfumes, and they're resting on the Sabbath according to God's commandment. And that might seem a little odd, but in their day, it was the women of the family who were charged with the burial preparations for their loved ones who had passed. They would wrap them in spices and perfume to preserve their body through this mourning period. And so they couldn't attend to Jesus's body, but they prepared what they could in accordance with the Sabbath. And then they waited. And there wasn't much else they could do. And I imagine if it were me, I'd feel a bit restless in that, as I felt that I could do all that I could, and all that was left was silence and waiting. Now, on the other hand, we see the Romans, and they're putting up more barriers between these women and Jesus. And it may have seemed to them like the enemy was winning, as God seemed distant and silent. I wonder if they felt that they could truly mourn, as they were followers of a traitor to Rome, or who had been deemed a traitor to Rome. And within that society, within that governing system, the followers of a traitor could be crucified right along with them. So could they mourn? Could they really do that? And really, as it's a Sabbath day and everyone's settling into their normal routines, how much would they feel like they could mourn as everyone else's lives seemed to be going on in their waiting and their silence? We see in hindsight that the story wasn't over. But I imagine that feelings of loss and sadness, doubt, and hopelessness had started to settle in, having experienced loss myself. Maybe you're in a season of silence or waiting. You're staying home. Heck, we're all staying home, right? Hopefully, with these stay-at-home orders. And there's loss in that. There are students who won't finish out this year of school, some of them seniors who may be struggling in that. We have teachers, especially our elementary teachers, who won't see these same kids in the classroom again. We have people experiencing loss from work, loss from plans failed, feeling lost without their friends and their family who they're being distant from. And maybe aside from that, maybe you're in a waiting period in something, waiting for some sort of good to come out of a tough situation. Maybe you're longing for the season to end, or wondering how your mourning could end to even allow room for joy. So, what can you do? Let's look to the women in this story. Look again to them. In their waiting, they did what they could. They prepared the spices and the perfume for Jesus' body, and then they obeyed God's command to rest. They were faithful in what they could do, and they were obedient to God's commands. Have you done all you seem to be able to do in your waiting, in this period of silence you might be in? Friends, I encourage you, be faithful and be obedient in your waiting. On that silent Saturday almost 2,000 years ago, those women were faithful and obedient in the silence amidst all the emotions that came with their loss. What they didn't understand was that Sunday was still coming, what Sunday would bring. We know in this story that God was not sitting back, as it may feel in those waiting times. He was not sitting back in defeat within this silence. He was conquering death. Friends, in your waiting, do not be deceived into thinking that God does not see you, that God is not moving and working. He sees you. He's working. Be faithful, be obedient, and hang on to the promises of who He is and what He says He'll do. He is faithful. Be faithful and obedient to Him.
Jesus loves me inside. Yes, the Bible. Jesus loves me so. Little ones who in me love. Yes, Jesus is strong. Yes, Jesus loves me.